Hello, and welcome to F1 with my uncle, where we are giving our predictions for the Miami Grand Prix. I'm Matt, and joined as always by my uncle. Dan, anything new this weekend?
Hey, Matt. Yeah, there is something we should discuss. We're recording this on Tuesday, and at this point in time in the afternoon, they are predicting rain
Ooh,
on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Woohoo! In Miami, and
nice.
that's at some point. I think it's in the afternoon. Um,
Yeah,
Obviously, that can change. Originally, I was looking at it. I started looking at it over the weekend. They were predicting dry for Saturday and maybe rain late Sunday, and then all of a sudden now it's all 3 days. So, and that's been that way for since yesterday evening. But that will change things if we do get rain. If the schedule sticks as far as when rain is predicted, it would affect the second practice on Friday, the afternoon session, and qualifying on Saturday and the race on Sunday. So, and that does change predictions, doesn't it?
absolutely. Yeah, I think obviously, like you said, anything can change by then. It can either be a guaranteed it's going to rain all day, or it'll just get completely dry. Who knows? So we're just going to go ahead and have two different sets of predictions: one if it's dry, one if it's wet. All right, so let's go ahead and kick things off with qualifying. Who do you think is going to take pole?
Who do I think is going to take pole? Um, as far as qualification, I think looking at this course, there's long, long straights and it's very fast. I'm giving the nod. Boy, I would love to say Red Bull, but I'm going to think that Leclerc is going to pull off a pole. I think Leclerc can do it.
Really
Now, if that's in the dry. If it's wet, I'm going with Max. That's all there is to it. If there's
interesting.
water on the track or if the track is moist, especially if they're on inters, I'm going to give the nod to Max simply because he has more experience and he does really well in the wet. But if it's dry, I'm going to go with Ferrari for the pole, and it would be Leclerc.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I actually have, regardless of whether I think Max is going to take it. I think the Miami circuit, so much of it's flat out, and we know that the Red Bull has a higher top speed with their engine. So I think he'll just put together an amazing lap regardless of conditions. So
Yep, that's reasonable. The top speed has been very close between the two cars, and there's situations where Ferrari has been a little faster than Red Bull, but
yeah,
at this point in the season, yeah, it's a bit of a toss up. But the Ferrari, that car has been extremely fast in the straights, and because of that, I think with this particular track, with the long straights and flat out, there's one bend in the straight, but I'm imagining it's a flat out bend. They won't have to lift.
yeah, right, yeah.
And then, so assuming that's the case, I'm gonna go with the nod. If it's dry to Ferrari, and even if it's wet, I wouldn't necessarily be surprised to see Leclerc take pole, but I think it does give a slight advantage to Red Bull that would, play to Max's experience, and because the cars are so close, that I think Red Bull has an advantage in that situation.
Yeah, fair point. All right, so let's move on to the race. Who do you think is going to round out the podium? What are your picks for
Round
that?
out the podium. Boy, that's a hard question for me
Oh yeah,
because again, it's the same situation, dry or wet, and there's
right.
obviously there's a lot of variables. So we're taking a reasonable best guess at this. Um, and I've seen some mistakes with Ferrari when things got tight. I saw Leclerc spin, and I think Ferrari does not have quite the clockwork type teamwork that Red Bull has developed over the last couple years. So I'm gonna go for Max for the win, whether it's wet or dry. My only caveat to that is that this is going to be a much warmer race than we saw in Imola,
Oh, true.
and there's a possibility that the fuel system reliability issues in the heat in Miami could become an issue for Red Bull again.
Oh,
So with
yeah.
yeah, with that caveat, and Ferrari hasn't had those issues.
Right. Yeah.
With that one caveat, I think I'm going to put Max on pole, Leclerc taking second, and I'm going to go out on a limb and put Sainz in third place over Perez.
Okay. And that's wet or dry, or is that just dry?
I'm going to put Sainz in third place if it's dry, and I'm going to put Perez in third if it's wet.
Okay.
Hmm. What about you?
Alrighty.
Let's
Yeah.
hear Matt's predictions.
Yeah. So I'm leaning pretty heavily in the train of thought that from what we've seen throughout the races this year, Red Bull seems to have a higher straight line speed. So I think if it's dry, I think Red Bull's gonna take back to back 1-2s. I think Max is gonna win, Perez is gonna get second, with Leclerc coming in third. However, if it's wet, I do think that will sufficiently switch things up. And I have Max in first with Leclerc coming in second. But I think Norris is going to come in third and clutch a podium if it's wet.
Oh, interesting. I mean, yeah, we saw that in Imola.
Yeah, he seems to really like the wet. I don't know why. It's as he put it in an interview, people just crashed out in front of him, but he's he's got a good run of wet race results, so I think it could happen.
Well, he was being honest at that point. Leclerc spun, otherwise he wouldn't have been on the podium. So
Yeah, yeah, true.
I'm pretty sure that. But we need to talk about McLaren versus Mercedes a little bit as far as what the results are going to look like after the race, because there's just briefly there's a real potential difference, because I think Mercedes is starting to deal with their porpoising issues by raising the ride height, which lowers the downforce. But it does reduce porpoising, and then they're going to add some bits to the car this weekend that will hopefully allow them to get more downforce without porpoising after the ride height's raised. But that's all fine and dandy for the dry, which I think could put Mercedes both in the top 10, pretty easily, maybe even the top 6 after the race, probably ahead of McLaren if they really address the issue. But if it's wet, then the lack of downforce to reduce the porpoising is going to counteract that ride height, due to the downforce being lower and the corners being wet. And in that case, I think McLaren's going to have the advantage over Mercedes, no matter what they do, no matter what they, being Mercedes, do.
Yeah, that's a really really good point.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, these are things that will be watching for, and our listeners can watch for as well. It's there's a lot of variables, and then of course in a rain race, or even qualifying, as we've seen, the choice of tires and when you go from slicks to inters or inters to slicks or full wets if it really rains, which it can do in Miami. The timing of those things in conjunction with safety cars, and if somebody switches to slicks and then there's a safety car and they did it under green flag racing and now everybody comes in under yellow, that kind of stuff, if it rains, is going to play into the results.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's the part we can't predict.
Right, right,
There
right.
is no Formula One crystal ball, unfortunately. But
Yeah, of course, all of this is assuming that none of our picks, DNF. So,
well, yeah, that nobody sticks it in the wall
yeah.
during qualifying, which could easily happen too, especially if it's wet.
So, to your point, though, I think that is a really, really good point about Mercedes and their setup. I
Mm.
actually have rounding out the top five in the dry. I've got Sainz in four and in P4 and Russell in P5. I think he's going to take his run of top five finishes and keep that going. And I think in the dry, he'll keep that. However, in the wet, I don't have him in the top 5 at all. I have, Perez in P4 and Sainz in P5. What are your thoughts?
Where do you have Lewis?
Uh, Undetermined. I don't know. Probably top 10, but don't know.
If the car, my thinking is if the car is improved, um, boy, Russell's been doing really well, so there's not a logical reason to choose Hamilton over Russell,
Yeah, that was my only
although
thought on that.
although
Yeah.
Hamilton is excellent in the wet.
True.
So if it's wet and they happen to find a good setup, I think Lewis is going to finish in front of Russell. If it's now, that didn't happen in Imola, but there were a whole bunch of other reasons why that didn't
Right,
happen.
yeah.
They go back to the sprint race and qualifying and everything else. So
Yeah.
again, all things being equal, and I think this is, yeah, I think Lewis could easily finish in front of Russell in this race, wet or dry,
Yeah.
but in the wet, I think he has an advantage. He's got all the experience. He's won plenty of rain races, so he knows how to do
True.
it.
True. So what are your picks then to round out the top 5?
Um, And I'm thinking if Mercedes deal with their issue at all, then I'm thinking Mercedes is going to do better than McLaren. But those two teams are probably going to be the third and fourth runners. Mercedes and McLaren is where I'm putting them. Yeah, that's what I would have to go with. And then beyond that, it's I think honestly the Aston Martin, we gave them props for finishing the race in the top 10 in Imola, but their car is not really that great. So it's hard to I would say at this point, Haas still looks better than Aston Martin,
Mm,
in a
yeah.
broader term. So, and that we talked about doing a wild card for the for the race. My wild card for a podium finish, and I'm not going to say, like Lando was kind of the wild card for third place. I'm going to put Mick Schumacher in on the podium in third place as my wild card position.
Over Magnussen.
Yep, that's my it's a wild card. I can do what I want.
Interesting. Okay. 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 And is that for the wet or for the dry?
It would be for the wet. Yeah, if it would be for the wet. For the dry, I'm gonna put Russell on the podium.
Russell on the podium.
Or
Okay.
Russell
Okay.
or Hamilton, either one, but I'm gonna put Mercedes on the podium. I'd have to think I guess, to be consistent, I'll have to say Lewis. Lewis on the podium in 3rd if it's dry.
Okay.
And then if it's wet, I think, I wanna see Mick on the podium. I think he could do it.
Yeah. So my wild card picks don't involve the podium. I think just in general, I think if it's dry, I was very encouraged last time out about Vettel and his showing. I know he lost out a little bit in the sprint, but he finished very well over the race. So I think he's a wild card pick for a top 10 in the dry.
Hmm.
However, in the wet, I think Yuki Tsunoda, I'm also encouraged by his result in the last race. And I think he's a wild card pick for a potential top 6, top 5 in the wet maybe, and I'll just be very curious to see what we see from him.
Well, in top 10, I wouldn't necessarily say Vettel doesn't have a chance at the top 10. I think their car looked better than it actually is in Imola, to be honest, but that was due to other factors. But there is somebody that we should be talking about, and we haven't. It just occurred to me. We haven't even mentioned Alpine and Fernando Alonso.
Oh, yeah.
So, because he wasn't a factor in Imola, so we haven't talked about him for a while. But frankly, he's been getting faster and faster and faster, and I think this Miami track's going to be right up his alley. So I might want to redo my wild card.
Okay, yeah, let's scrap that then. I completely forgot because, like you said, it's the
Yeah.
whole recency bias thing. He's had a couple of terrible results due to due to things outside of his control. So screw that. My wild card pick for the wet is going to be Alonso.
Yeah, I'm gonna put Fernando on the podium as my wild card.
Okay.
In a wild card, yeah, I'm gonna put him in P1 at the end.
Okay.
I would love to see that.
I will buy you a beer if that happens.
Hey, I'll take it. There is one other thing I wanted to mention about Miami
Yeah, what's that?
that our listeners need to know. You know that beautiful marina that's there with the boats in it and everything?
I have seen pictures, yes.
It's not real. It's real in the sense that it holds water, but it's not an actual functioning marina. It's man-made for the cameras. So
There's no way. They're making a like a pond and they're putting boats in it.
they created a marina to make it look good for the cameras with boats. I just had to throw that out.
That's hilarious.
My
That is
oldest son Ben
hilarious.
reminded me of that. And I thought, oh, I meant to mention that. He's right. That is kind of funny. So shout out to Ben. Thanks for reminding me.
That's so funny. Alrighty, well, that's going to wrap up our predictions for the Miami weekend. As with all things, it's all in good fun and could potentially end up being completely wrong. But hey, that's what's fun about F1. Feel free to go ahead and put your predictions in the comments, and we look forward to reading those. And we will be back with you, as always, for the race and weekend recap on Monday. So until then, thanks so much for watching, and take care of yourselves.